Welcome back, everyone. POW Ponder All Weather here. Happy Friday out there. Thanks so much for everybody that tuned in to my live coverage last night on severe weather. Man, that was really intense. And that severe weather has moved on in portions of Tennessee as well as in Kentucky. This afternoon, they've got embedded tornado warnings lined up across this region. Some very heavy rain and some intense winds as this powerful upper level low continues to wreak havoc and moving across portions of the east. Underneath that, we've got widespread wind advisories across much of the good portion of the southeast. They do in fact have a tornado watch that's still in effect until now, until 4 o'clock this afternoon. High wind warnings pretty much cover the entire state of Tennessee with those dangerous 60, 70, if not almost 80 mile-per-hour winds, and then the very heavy rain that across flood watches and flood warnings across portions of southern Missouri here, and as well as western portions of Kentucky. And then just to the north, they do have widespread winter storm warnings across portions of northern Indiana as well as southern Michigan here, and then also more winter storm warnings and watches up here in portions of New England as it becomes more of a snowstorm on the northwest side of that system. But here's the map about 2 o'clock. We've got this dangerous supercells kind of lighting up across this board. We do have several tornado warnings already ongoing right now, and I think this will just continue as we get deeper into the afternoon before things settle down this evening. But between now and then, it's definitely going to be a bumpy ride across this region. So be on high alert of those 60, 70, if not 80 mile-per-hour wind gusts, and isolated embedded tornadoes is definitely not ruled out. To the north of there, yes, it's got the heavier rain aspect, and then we should start to see the snow start to fly about 2 o'clock, and that will just intensify as we get into the evening time frame. Portions like into Fort Wayne, Indiana, will start cranking out the snow. Portions of southern Michigan here, and that'll swing across upstate New York, getting into portions of Massachusetts with the heavier snow, and then the squall line will be inundating on the south side across the Carolinas here, with kind of a skinny squall line of that damaging wind threat will be shifting off and kind of weakening as it moves across into the evening time frame. But by the time we head into your Saturday afternoon, things have really started to settle down, and then again that snowstorm will start to settle down as well. This is your kind of your back half of the system of the snow will be winding itself down into your Saturday afternoon time frame. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns on North America, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel, and it's important to hit the like button as well. It definitely helps out more than you know. And if you're in the market for a weather station, I highly recommend the Tempest Weatherflow weather station. A lot of people have taken advantage of this, and if you'd like to order one for yourself, you can do so. It gives you 10% off and free shipping at checkout. So it's real convenient. It takes like 10 minutes to install, and it's all solar. Plus, you could tap it into your irrigation system. It does a little bit of everything for you. So if you'd like to purchase one of these, here's my link, and I'll have that in the description below so you can actually order one for yourself. But moving on to Sunday, things get interesting because we'll have another trough coming in off the west. It continues to remain cold for them. And yes, we have another system coming in for the Pacific Northwest with more heavy snows in those regions. Well, they've been inundated as of late, and more cold air will enter the picture, and then more rain, especially in the northern side of California. They get hit hard again with that another significant system that will be moving in. There's also a system that will be coming in across portions of the Dakotas and fishtailing back into portions of Minnesota as we get into your Sunday afternoon. But heading into Monday, we do see the ridge try to come back. We've seen this so many times again. We got the cold front moving through, then the ridge builds back. So it does build back for a couple days on your Monday time frame across portions of the southern plains, much of the southeast. But the difference is we've got some blocking starting to take shape over the top, and that will set the stage for that troughing underneath. And that troughing will eventually kind of win the war on this southeast ridge. It's going to take a couple of days, but eventually it will break down this ridge. But between now and then, we'll have kind of a zonal flow pattern setting up as the colder air will be locked up to the northern region, and then the southern branch will be more of a Pacific flow, basically off a warm flow off the Pacific, and they'll have more Pacific air and dealing with those, above average temperatures. But the difference is the teleconnections finally take a major dip once we get into that second week of March. So by the time we head into that 7th time frame, it's still well above average. But the trend is your friend, and that cold air, that trough that's going to be hanging up into the Pacific Northwest, that's finally going to be diving down into the southern regions, and they'll be able to tap into some of that colder air. Plus, that'll bring the snow line down as well. So that's a significant change heading into next week. But that doesn't happen till the end of the week. So by the time Tuesday rolls around, we're still locked into that southeast ridge into portions of the southern plains and a good part of the southeast. Much of the north and the Intermountain West and our northern states are still going to be that well below average, where it's going to basically be a separation between winter and spring here. But finally, winter will be losing its battle, and we're kind of taking over essentially as that jet stream by Thursday timeframe. As those teleconnections finally dip, that's going to allow the jet stream to dip as well. And plus, we got the southern jet a little bit more active as well. We've got a low pressure center going to be forming just south into Mexico here. That's going to be able to cause that lift, tap into some of this Gulf moisture along with the cold air, and that's going to spell some colder temperatures and some snowier weather as well. So here's the setup going forward by the time we get into the 8th time frame. That's essentially the second week of March. All the cold air that's locked over much of the west and Pacific Northwest will moderate and push further south, and slowly going to be eating away of this southeast ridge the deeper we get into that second week of March. And that's going to allow the snow line to dip as well. So yes, by the time we head into that Thursday, that March the 9th time frame, there's the snow line really starting to dig across eastern portions of Colorado. Those isobars really start to tighten up in portions of Nebraska here, as well as into Kansas. The snow should be flying into portions, far western portions of Oklahoma. And then as that continues, there's the 540 line dipping all the way down in a good part of the southern plains with those colder conditions for March standards. And then the snow will be flying into portions of Missouri as well as into Illinois by this time next Friday timeframe, and sneaking back into Indiana as we have a bona fide another low pressure center really trying to maximize and deepen. But yes, pretty cold air for March standards come in on the backside, and you can see those well below average temperature anomalies. It's not going to feel like spring, guys. It's going to feel like more like winter, with a good 20 to 25 degrees below average for a good part of the central US and much of the southern plains. But that will eventually sneak into the southeast, and they won't have the the ridge to be in place anymore. They'll finally experiencing those colder conditions, or at least cooler conditions for March standards. Not January anymore, but it doesn't have the same effect, but still 20 to 25 degrees, a below average by the time we head into this time next Friday timeframe. But that's going to allow that bona fide snowstorm to really start to crank up as it shifts off into the Ohio Valley and headed into the Northeast. We're down to a 981 millibar on the latest European as those tight isobars really start to wind up. So this could end up fairly good snowstorm, especially with that EPO going negative and remaining negative. That's a good signal with that cold air is going to continue to press. And as it presses, all this should be in the form of snow by the time we get into that time frame as this is moving forward. And the Canadian is even more bullish depending on the overall track of the actual low pressure center. But yes, it takes it a little bit off the coast and deepens it even further. I'm not thinking it gets down to this low, but it's still a system that we could watch, going forward as we get deeper into the middle of next week, because it could be a fairly significant system on the table with those teleconnections continue to remain negative as cold air continues to push further into the East Coast. So between now and then, we've got the 7-day precipitation anomalies putting that rain along the West Coast into Washington and Oregon, and a good part of Northern California gets back onto the heavy rain action. some snow into the higher elevations of the Intermountain West. Notice it's starting to dry out across portions of Southern California, much of Arizona, much of New Mexico. Still remains dry out in West Texas, and yes, where the system starts to come into play, mainly east of the I-35 corridor, but especially a lot of this rain's happening over the next day or two across a good part of Kentucky into Tennessee, but especially into Illinois as well as Indiana. Today alone, they're getting some very heavy rain. So this is a compounding effect between now and the end of next week. This whole area will be picking up a good chunk of precipitation, going forward over the next 7 days. And that will shift off into the mid-Atlantic states as well as into the Northeast. But behind that, like I mentioned, this air starts out west and it slowly eats away the southeast ridge, and then eventually will head east. So these are the temperature anomalies from the 10th through, say, the 15th time frame of going into that later half of the second week of March there, getting into that third week towards the middle of March. We should have a good part of the U.S. because this is overall a 5-day temperature anomaly average between the means average, a good, 10 to 15 degrees below average means. That's pretty chilly stuff for March standards. And a lot of you guys will be experiencing spring break by then. So yes, it's not going to feel like spring break this year for a good part of the country as we get closer into that time frame. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me in the next update where I protect you for and after the storm.